With prayers for everybody's safety, we start our today's discussion on the wrist joint. Now, you know that to study any joint, the first thing that you must know is its type. Now, the wrist joint, it is a biaxial ellipsoid type of synovial joint. As there is considerable movement in the wrist joint and it has a capsular ligament with a synovial membrane, so obviously it is a synovial joint. From the structure and shape of the articulating bony surfaces that we shall discuss, it will be clear that it is an ellipsoid type of joint, and ellipsoid joint is usually biaxial because they allow movements in two axes, one a transverse axis and an anteroposterior axis. So as a whole, to say it is a biaxial ellipsoid type of synovial joint. Now coming to the articulating bony surfaces, the proximal articulating bony surface is formed by the distal articular surface of the lower end of the radius. So this is the radius, the lower end, and this is the distal articular surface of the lower end of the radius, and also by the articular disc. This is this triangular cartilage. It is the articular disc of the inferior radioulnar joint. So you see that these two articulating areas together, they form an oval socket-like structure, and this is another view of the proximal articulating bony surfaces, which shows that the distal articular surface of the lower end of the radius, it presents a fossa scaphoide and a fossa lunata for articulating respectively with the scaphoid and the lunate bones. And this articular disc, this triangular articular disc, the apex of which is attached to the notch between the ulnar styloid process and the head. Here the apex is attached and the base is attached to the lower end of the radius. Okay. So this articular disc, it excludes the participation of the head of the ulna in the formation of the wrist joint. Now here we can see that this is the distal articulating bony surface, and this distal articulating bony surface, as it is being traced, it is reciprocally convex and it is formed by the proximal row of carpal bones, namely the scaphoid, the lunate and the triquetrum or the triquetral bone, along with the intercarpal ligaments. So they form a continuous reciprocally convex bony surface. The wrist joint has a capsular ligament along with a synovial membrane and radial and ulnar collateral ligaments. The capsular ligament, it is attached around the peripheral margins of the proximal and distal articular bony surfaces that we have just discussed. Okay. The capsular ligament on the palmar and dorsal aspect, it is thickened to form the palmar and dorsal radiocarpal ligaments, which extend inferomedially from the lower end of the radius to the respective surfaces of the proximal row of carpal bones and also to the capitate. On the lateral and medial aspects, there are two thickenings which forms the radial and the ulnar collateral ligaments. The radial collateral ligament, it extends from the styloid process of the radius to the scaphoid and the trapezium, and the ulnar collateral ligament, it extends from the ulnar styloid process to the triquetral and the pisiform bones. Now here you can see this is the volar or palmar radiocarpal ligament, and this is the dorsal radiocarpal ligament. In both cases the direction is from the radius, it is inferomedial. Here also it is inferomedial. This is the thumb, this is the radial side. Here this is the thumb, this is the radial side. Now here you can see that the radial, this is the radial collateral ligament extending from the radial styloid process going to the scaphoid and the trapezium, and on the medial side you can see the ulnar collateral ligament going to the pisiform and the triquetral. This is the pisiform bone, and from here it extends as the pisometacarpal ligament to the base of the fifth metacarpal, and to the hook of the hamate as the pisohamate ligament. The blood supply to the wrist joint is given by the palmar and dorsal carpal arches, which are formed by the anterior interosseous artery, okay, and the anterior and posterior carpal branches of the radial and ulnar arteries, and the recurrent branch of the deep palmar arch. The anterior interosseous and posterior interosseous nerves, the anterior interosseous nerve is a branch of the median nerve, the posterior interosseous nerve is the deep branch of the radial nerve. Okay, these nerves gives the nerve supply to the wrist joint, and the C6 and C7 spinal segments, they control the flexion and the extension movements of the wrist joint. Now, before discussing about the movements, we must understand that many of the movements which are taking place or at the wrist joint are actually also taking place or even predominantly taking place at the mid-carpal joints. And this is because the muscles causing the movements in these two joints are the same muscles, and hence they are known as the link joints. Now, flexion and extension, these two movements are occurring in a transverse axis. The flexion movement is mostly occurring at the mid-carpal joint, and it is extending to a range of about 85 degrees. Okay, and most of the flexion is actually taking place at the mid-carpal joint. Now, with flexed fingers, carpal flexion is diminished due to increased tension of the extensors. This you can try it for yourself, that after you have fully flexed the wrist joint, you will see the flexion of the fingers becomes more difficult because of the tension of the extensor muscles. However, extension is more limited. It happens to about 60 degrees, and this movement mostly occurs at the wrist joint. Adduction is also called ulnar deviation. It mostly occurs at the wrist joint, and abduction is called radial deviation, and it mostly or exclusively occurs at the mid-carpal joint. Adduction and abduction takes place in an anteroposterior axis. Now adduction is more extensive. It is about 45 degrees. The range is about 45 degrees, whereas abduction is limited to only about 15 degrees. This is because the radial styloid process is more distal than the ulnar styloid process. So abduction is more limited than the ulnar deviation or adduction. Now, when there is flexion, adduction, extension and abduction in a sequence, then the movement that occurs is known as circumduction. Okay. Now in this picture you can see that this is adduction, this is the adduction or ulnar deviation. Now this is the neutral position and this is abduction or the radial deviation. From the neutral position, this is flexion and this is extension. Now we come to the muscles causing the movements. Now here in flexion, the flexor carpi ulnaris and the flexor carpi radialis, these are the prime movers, and they are assisted by the flexor digitorum superficialis and profundus, the flexor pollicis longus and the abductor pollicis longus. So the flexor carpi ulnaris and the flexor carpi radialis, they are the prime movers of the flexion of the wrist joint, and the other flexors, that is the flexor digitorum superficialis and profundus, flexor pollicis longus, are assisting the prime movers. Also, the abductor pollicis longus assists flexion. Extension. In extension, the prime movers are again the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis and the extensor carpi ulnaris. So the flexor and the extensor carpi muscles are the prime movers in both these movements, whereas the other extensors like the extensor digitorum, extensor indicis, extensor pollicis longus and the extensor digiti minimi, these assist the prime movers. Okay. Adduction is caused by the simultaneous contraction of the two carpi ulnaris muscles, the flexor and the extensor carpi ulnaris muscles. Okay. Whereas abduction, it is caused by the abductor pollicis longus along with the simultaneous contraction of the flexor carpi radialis and the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. Okay. So adduction or the ulnar deviation is caused by the carpi muscles on the ulnar side or the medial side, whereas abduction is mainly caused by the flexor and extensor carpi muscles on the radial side. Along with it, also the abductor pollicis longus causes abduction. This abductor pollicis longus also assists flexion. Now these are some of the important relations of the wrist joint. Okay, this you can understand from your knowledge of dissection of the anteriorly. You have the tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus and superficialis, the flexor pollicis longus, the flexor carpi radialis, the flexor carpi ulnaris. You have the median nerve, the ulnar nerve, and posteriorly you have the tendons of the extensor carpi ulnaris, the extensor digiti minimi, the extensor digitorum, the extensor indicis, the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, the extensor pollicis longus and brevis, and the abductor pollicis longus. Medially, you have the posterior cutaneous branch of the ulnar nerve, and laterally the radial artery. Now we come to a very important part, that is the applied anatomy. This wrist joint is very commonly affected in rheumatoid arthritis. It is also affected in osteoarthritis, and ganglion cysts are very common in the wrist joint and in the hand. It also occurs at the ankle and the feet, but it is more common in the in association with the wrist joint and the joints of the hand, and it is more common on the dorsal aspect of the wrist joint. Now, what is a ganglion cyst? First of all, it is a benign lump or swelling, and it is formed by extension of the synovial sheath from a joint or a covering of a tendon, and it is filled with a mucin-like fluid which is much similar to the synovial fluid, and it is more common in women. The incidence increases with age, and it is rarely seen in children and young adults, and it is very commonly associated with the degenerative diseases of the joint. Okay, ganglion cysts are usually small. They rarely extend beyond an inch, and they are usually painless. They cause pain when they press on an adjacent nerve, and they may have to be surgically removed, or they may simply disappear with time. Now we come to two important fractures that causes deformity of the wrist joint. They are the Colles fracture and the Smith's fracture. Both of these fractures are actually fractures of the lower end of the radius. Colles fractures occurs when a person falls in this way with an outstretched hand, and Smith's fractures occurs when the person falls with the wrist joint in a flexed position. Now, in Colles fracture is more common, and here the distal end of the radius is fractured, and there is a dorsal displacement. The distal fractured end is displaced dorsally and proximally, and non-union is not common complication in such fractures. The fractured fragments get very easily united, but they can get united in a displaced position, and this is known as malunion. And often when in Colles fracture, because of this dorsal and upward displacement, it is united in this wrong position. It causes a deformity which is termed as a dinner fork deformity, because there is a dorsal deformity here which resembles the shape of a dinner fork. In Smith's fracture, this distal fractured fragment is displaced ventrally. It is displaced ventrally and upwards. Okay. So these are the common diseases that are associated with the wrist joint. Okay. So with this we come to the end of our today's discussion. Thank you for your patient hearing.